Hello again. I'm back with more lunacy to offer than ever before. Note that this run is brought to you by my patrons on Patreon who helped me fund a capture card in order to make these videos possible at all. Thanks again so much, guys. This time I'm running a godsend of a game developed by Arc System Works and published by Konami, known as Hardcore Uprising. A brand new take on the Contra franchise is something we all wanted and deserved. Thankfully enough, Konami hired the right people for the job. I normally don't trust a company putting their IPs in the hand of exterior parties, but this time it turned out so great that I can't complain. As par for the course with content featured on my channel is a little bit of lunacy, boiled with a generous seasoning of intensity and an endless pouring of salt. I'd be lying if I said this project didn't take all I had left in me to complete. This isn't just an ordinary run of an ordinary Contra game. This is played using Sayuri, who is by definition a real Strider incarnation, and also the most destructive force of the playable characters in the game. So what does this have to do with minimalism, you say? Well, think about the following. As you can see, Sayuri uses a sword. Just let that sink in for a moment. A sword in a Contra game. That's the same as playing a bullet hell title with a toothpick as a weapon. Now, sure, to balance things out, Sayuri's charged sword attack shoots a projectile. But in a game like this, it's literally mandatory if you want it to be possible at all. Note that I've also removed any and all benefits and upgrades I possibly could to make this a real pain in the ass. All I'm keeping are the essentials from arcade mode and that's it. Literally the bare minimum to make this tolerable. The second rule obviously speaks for itself. No damage means that I have to become overly familiar with the stage and bosses of the game, and be ready for any set of tricks they may have up their sleeves. And they have a lot, trust me on this one. Some might argue that using Sayuri is taking the easy way out of this challenge, but those with common sense will realize that the levels were specifically tailor-made for the gun users, and that Sayuri was just an afterthought, hence her mandatory projectile attack. If the boss fights are in this case easier just because I'm using Sayuri, the stages sure as hell aren't. Those of you who are here for their daily dose of Contra madness should find what they were looking for. The stages are long, diverse, challenging, filled to the brim with traps and surprises, and most importantly, they all feature multiple bosses, which for the most part will keep you on your toes, assuming they have a life bar that grants them a longer lifespan than that of an ant. As I mentioned before, the fact that I'm using Sayuri pretty much negates most of the difficulty of the bosses from the game, but it makes for some interesting nightmares to torment us during the stages, and honestly, this is what most of this project is about. The awesome stages and their well-executed concepts. If I wanted to put emphasis on the boss fights, you'd be watching a boss rush video right now, not this. It should come as no surprise by now that I am, as always, ruminating and revolving around classic-style platformers and games reminiscent of the past. This is a great modern take on the Contra series, and I feel this is a game that never got the exposure and recognition it deserved. With the run-and-gun genre practically out of the market in this day and age, I feel that this game succeeded in bringing it back, or at least tried to, in the most formidable way possible. As a lifelong Contra fan, it was fun to revisit a successful formula with new tricks up its sleeve. Since this game is a complete reinterpretation of the Contra formula, it is an extremely ambitious move, especially when considering that the genre has been absent from the mainstream gaming scene since the good old arcade days, which means the 1990s. Oh yeah, and I'm clearly having too much fun against this boss. There's no point in commentating about him since, well, as you can see, he died. One more bit of writing on this futuristic motorcycle, and we prove that Hollywood lost its original concepts by showing how a 2D side-scroller game can have you jump and hold onto a helicopter to end a scene. See ya for stage 2.
A true warrior.
No, that's not what I meant. I meant that the stage could be done much faster if it weren't for the goddamn fish ruining every and all attempt at speeding through the second segment while... Oh shit! Commentary. Stage 2 is a treat in every aspect of its existence, one of the better levels of the game, both in terms of stage design and atmosphere, which is heavily optimized by the ass-kickin' tune that accompanies it. If you're good at dodging, this level should be an amusement park for you. It's the most speed-driven on-foot level to be found in the game, because it's about moving forward senseless and non-stop, or at least to the best of your abilities. The tricky part here is the color scheme. When you run, you have to pay close attention and scrutinize every single bit of visual standing in front of you. Because the flowers and venomous plants blend so well with the background, it's easy to let one slip and have an accident. Although I gotta say, if you're experienced with the game, eventually you can do it rather mindlessly, but that's a feat that comes with experience. Ironically, or rather unironically, since we're talking about this game, the robot fish are still the greatest threat to a no damage run ever. Given the fact that I'm playing as Sayuri, it means I don't have the super machine gun or spread gun in my arsenal that I can flood the screen with. This means either play it risky or button mash while somehow calculating and timing your button mashing to get through without taking damage. It's silly, but if it weren't silly, I wouldn't be here talking to you. If not on the wooden bridge, the most failures occur at the alligator segments and that little sunshine and rainbow segment near the end, given the fact that they're pretty much out of screen and just randomly hop in. Kind of a cheap shot, to be honest. The mini-boss here isn't the biggest problem by a long shot, but he's still a truly decent fight, a very cool concept I gotta say. It's a ship that splits in two, and then you have to manage both of them and their projectiles at the same time. Good enough to keep you on your toes, but really shouldn't kill a run, especially if you play as a gun user. And thank the good lord Sayuri can use her projectiles, because without those, the fight would last a ridiculous amount of time. Countering the green bullets also helps a lot, but to counter them correctly all the time, every time for optimal damage shouldn't be expected of a regular player. One thing I'd like to point out is how diverse this level is. The concept stays the same, move forward at full speed and don't get clogged by the snipers. But the gimmick and environment, hell even the visuals keep changing and evolving. This makes for an absolutely legitimate feeling of progression and advancement throughout the level. One thing worth noting is that the stage designers put very well calculated obstacles for you to take advantage of. The sandbags and the barrels. I've seen those being exploited in very interesting and cool ways in speedruns, and it's always satisfying to pull a good one on those. Another thing I'd like to point out is that in this level, we face one of my favorite bosses, Leviathan using the Knight Persica mech suit. Sure, in this video it's been reduced to a joke, but it's one of the funnest and most involved battles of the game when you give it time to flourish. It's very reminiscent of Sting Chameleon from X1, and it brings its own unique Japanese ninja-esque atmosphere to it. For optimal enjoyment, play as Bahamut and enjoy the rivalry between the two. I'll still bother describing the battle regardless, hoping it'll inspire someone to go and toy around with him a little. He starts the fight by dashing forward, all the time, every time. After that, it's Russian roulette. Either stay in a corner and play it safe, or literally search the arena for him. Both strategies have their own appeal, but I enjoy tracking him down a lot more, especially with a gun user. When he's invisible, he'll try to snipe you off and then try to hit you by going straight at you. It sounds like a pretty basic concept, but we're still at the beginning of the game, and I feel this is a great second boss if that makes any sense. I'll see you for stage 3, which is probably some sort of homage to Indiana Jones. If you're watching this and weren't born in the 90s, I feel sorry for you. I mean, I know the first movie wasn't released in the 90s, but that's when it was easily available, at least for me. I mean, the second movie was in 84 and the third movie was in 89, but even in the 90s, you could still rent them at the local store that smelled like gas and candy all at the same time. But that's irrelevant, because by the time you watch this, they'll probably have tried to revamp the franchise and, yeah, I'm getting way off track here. See you for stage 3. Amidst all this Indiana Jones rambling from stage 2, part of me was actually serious. This stage references many things from the movies, and it's actually quite nice to see, but obviously enough, I won't spoil them for you. Things start off simple enough with a slow and smooth entry into the level. As soon as you enter, it's suddenly fairly crowded and has a few surprise projectiles waiting for you. Thanks for the warning, Konami. I get it. I gotta keep myself focused somehow. Tight corridors seem to be a way of life for this stage. As a matter of fact, it seems to be the core concept. Fill small hallways with traps and enemies and watch players fail on their first few tries. Double the hilarity factor of it if you're playing 2 players, triple it if it's 2 unexperienced players, quadruple it if it's 1 gun user and 1 Sayuri, and quintuple it if it's 2 unexperienced Sayuris, because there's no goddamn way they can do it on their first try without taking damage. I kinda strayed from the point here. Oh yeah, before the mini-boss, I actually wanted to demonstrate that you can have this robot try to damage you. Actually, including this into the boss introduction cutscene doesn't change a single thing, but I thought it was a nice little bit to show off. Oh yes, you almighty frickin' robot, show me your ways. 573 Tigress. Besides having the least threatening name after Duff McWhalen, he finds himself being a reasonable chore when confronted using Sayuri. I had a few close calls during the fight, one in particular that surprises me. There was one instance where I seemed to have predicted he would shoot a laser, so I didn't jump, and it was actually the right thing to do. I'll point the specific time frame in the video description for you guys to check out. I'll also explain what I mean in greater detail and whatnot. I don't know what to say about him. It's pretty much as if Toho was made into a 2D action platformer and limited to half a broken corridor featuring nothing but a sword as a means for self-defense. Actually, screw this. I think I just described the concept for the next best game ever. Nothing speaks ingenuity like lazily describing what's in front of you to come up with the next free-to-play bullshit game to get everyone excited to pop out on their cell phones. Pay $1 to add a new dangerous bullet or some shit. Okay, I should stop. I'm afraid of giving someone serious ideas. Tigress crumbles under his own metallic mass and we enter Indiana Jones, the movie, the game, the experience, the adventure in Hardcore Uprising on PS3. The boulders you see in the corridor here are a prelude to what's coming for you. I actually enjoy this short segment. It's pretty hardcore even if it lasts only about 10 seconds. Okay, so I can't keep this charade up. This giant boulder is actually the biggest nod and wink Konami and friends could have done to Indiana Jones, like ever. Then took full advantage of the boulder and spike room gimmick and mixed the two into one. Match made in heaven for your Contra fans who felt neglected in recent years. Since the rest of the stage is pretty much self-explanatory, let's talk about how the stage runs with a gun user in relation to Sayuri, since this is something you guys love to hear. The main handicap, which is a lack of reach for Sayuri, is more than present in this level. It's such that it actually makes the easiest of enemies a potential threat if you aren't paying attention enough. Unless you're bad at platforming, doing this stage with a gun user should be no problem, especially when considering that the laser literally goes through walls and other enemies, negating most of what makes it hard in the first place. The only exception would be those robots with long arms that explode once you defeat them. The spread gun floods the screen, rendering the shockwave shooting bats useless. The submachine gun is an almighty Deus Ex Machina style treat. The missile gun destroys everything in one shot. The ripple gun reflects little spiders and projectiles, which are present in high numbers in the stage, and the heated plasma destroys projectiles as well as it destroys enemies. The only real threat in here for gun users are traps and exploding robots. But with Sayuri, everything is present and felt double due to a lack of reach. How's that for a hardcore Contra level? Oh yeah, the boss. For those of you who wonder, 573 Draconis is a real joke. It's kinda odd to see the level's end boss shoot so little projectiles in such a cramped stage. It's not that I'd say he's too easy, but come on now. I fail to see how he can pose any problem to any properly prepared player, maybe at the exception of his underwater missiles, which can be a real pain in the ass, but luckily for me, he doesn't live long enough to make his existence a pain in my ass. It's all about focusing and timing your projectile shots. Destroy his missiles and lower his life bar until he switches forms. It's more of a test in patience and focus, see attention span, than it is a test of skill, and with gun users, this fight is so pathetic it's almost comedic. You just shoot mindlessly until he reaches his third phase, which is actually really dangerous to gun users, considering that if you fuck it up in any way, you lose your weapon and it makes this battle a real chore because it seems to stretch on and last forever. Well, this stage sure was a mouthful. I'll see you next for Grand Theft Auto. I mean stage 4. You'll understand once you see it.
A true warrior.
Commentaries are already difficult as hell for me to do, and here I gotta fill 9 minutes of this shit. For those of you who are here to understand what I meant by Grand Theft Auto in the last video, well here you go. Blow shit up and cops are after ya. A concept made novelty ages ago. This is an auto-scroller on steroids. Nothing new for longtime Contra fans. Normally I'm a huge hater of auto-scrollers, but here I've got a massive hard-on for the whole 9 minutes of gameplay required to get through. I'll be covering a lot of material in this one video, so if I were you I'd pause the video, go get yourself a popcorn or some sort of comfort food, and then come back. Oh no, by all means, do it. I'll wait for ya. I'm patient. Okay, so things are progressing at a crazy pace here, so I logically can't just go on a tangent about any aspect in particular, because by the time I start describing it, it's gone. The main gimmick here is that you're on these hoverboards and you gotta survive an entire mobile gauntlet throughout a highway that looks like it's straight out of Mega Man X's Able City. Cars, helicopters, projectile shooting enemies, and a bunch of obnoxious little annoyances will come after you like Canadians to maple syrup. Except, I don't think Canadians are trying to kill maple syrup or something, but whatever. This is 9 minutes of rambling, and any amount of time I can spend talking counts for something. I won't stab your ears with filler though, so let's move on. One important thing to know is that the counter move is available when you are on these hoverboards. Without it, the stage would reach legendary levels of complication. Even if in this gameplay footage, I'm clearly showcasing myself having the best goddamn time ever. It's quite strange that I don't really have any particular bitching to do about this level. By being an auto-scroller, I found myself instantly biased against it on my first few runs of the game. And well, it quickly grew on me and shoved my bias up my own ass. Think about exhilarating moments from games like Mega Man X2, 4, and maybe even X8. What did all these games have in common? Ride chaser segments that were all about speed, adrenaline, and exhilaration. Not precision or some important shit to consider like avoiding damage or something like that. This stage starts off by pacing this amazing foot-tapping music. You reach the main highway and you suddenly start experiencing a sense of speed that's new to the game, yet familiar if you were following the franchise for all those years. Important to note is that the hoverboard does go faster if you don't take any damage. You can't really see the comparison here because, well, obviously I don't get hit. But whenever you take damage, everything slows down and you gotta pick that speed back up. This is the ultimate insult and supreme punishment in my opinion. It doesn't matter if you're skilled at the game or not, your fun is heavily impaired when you get to slow down, because regardless of your skill level, you still get that feeling of exhilaration by simply being in the stage, and having that awesomeness slowed down pisses you off, making you want to improve and avoid damage just so you can enjoy all that speed again. It's the same as playing a rhythm game that mutes the audio whenever you fail a note, and only plays the music as long as your notes are successful. Proper punishment that encourages you to be at your best, and it works. Trust me on that. This is the tricky part of the level. Yes, for once, I actually have enough time to describe something before it disappears. This tunnel suggests one of two things. Either you're a Contra God and have the reaction time of a squirrel with ADHD, or you learn through failure and memorization, which also includes some adaptation to the ever-changing placement and order of the chase cars. This part is genuinely tricky and tests your reflexes. If you want to go through without taking damage, remember that this specific segment involves timing above any other aspect of the stage design, and in such an adrenaline-charged level, it's easy to do a jump or maneuver prematurely. Far from me is the desire to discourage anyone from venturing into this level, but consider it natural if the tunnel segment kicks your ass on the first few runs. It's not necessarily cheap, it's just intended to keep you on your toes. As par for the course with this game, doing this level with Sayuri involves a very different strategy than with any of the gun users. With a gun user, you are encouraged to remain in the middle of the screen as much as possible for safety. But as Sayuri, most of that approach is spayed, neutered, digested, ejected by whatever means necessary, and then put on a silver plate to remind you that yes, while your sword may be an almighty thing, it lacks the reach necessary to make this level anything comfy. I have to go out of my way to cut down the enemies and reach them with my blade before zoning out of the reach they've gained on me. Possibly sounds simple or run-of-the-mill for a 2D platformer, but keep in mind that I have to avoid any and all damage to my character. This means that zoning and timing every obstacle and attack going my way is extremely important, and that I am given no real window of opportunity unless I go out of my way to risk everything all the time. To be quite honest, I'm more describing my overall experience with the level than I am this current run, because, well, I'm not having a hard time. At all. Ironically enough, no matter how intense this stage gets, if you've mapped and timed every single little thing, you'll breeze through it very easily. The stage is on a global timer and is always the same. I'd love to say that the same thing applies for the mini-bosses, but I'm a little uncertain because I think one of them has a small variation during the debris fall in its second phase. Right on time for the boss. If you were born in the 90s, and yes, I am going on and on again about the 90s, that means you were old enough to remember the Beyblade anime from the early 2000s. This boss looks like it came straight out of that show. I mean, seriously, what the fuck even is this thing? I'm not trying to be funny. The first time I reached it, I just stared at my screen with both a questioning and amazed expression. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying that I don't even know what the fuck it is I'm fighting against. So yes, I'll call it a Beyblade. A Beyblade called Lux Corona. This is a projectile crazy motherfucker, and literally the most dangerous fight for Sayuri in the entire game. Like its level, it's based on nothing but timing, precision, and careful placement. The first phase has the boss rotating while shooting from weak spots that you have to damage. Now, this is a very easy concept to battle against on paper, but for crying out loud, I have a sword here, and going up close and personal with this boss almost guarantees a failure if you slip up even in the slightest, so I'm being ultra careful here. There's no need to waste my attempt after such a successful and accurate run of the stage. This giant thing keeps spinning until all weak spots have been successfully destroyed. There's two ways to tackle this boss fight with Sayuri. Play it safe and shoot projectiles, or go as close as possible, enter the cannon looking spot where the weak spot is hidden, and destroy it as quickly as possible, because if your ass takes too long, this guarantees a failure. My skills at button mashing were lost through this challenge, so there's no way I was gonna go fucking lumen on this thing. Even if my mind tells my body to go ape shit on it, my hands are no longer able to follow. I actually consider this to be my last button mashing project, ever, because I literally can no longer do it. No matter how hard I try, no matter how much I want it to work, my hands just won't follow anymore, but I'm getting off track here. All that's left of the fight is the rotation and bullet hell phase. Basically, watch for the boss's movement pattern and pretend the game now works in 3D. I think this is a very neat idea actually. I often praise boss fights when they are really involved, and this is a good example. You now have to consider the boss's design and mass to survive this battle, not just the projectiles that it shoots. Its actual body is now a threat, and given its oversized ass, this isn't nothing. The bullet hell part isn't that complicated. If you're familiar with the genre, just dodge and counter. If you want the easier way out, just counter. If you want an even easier way out, just dodge everything and shoot because countering requires good timing. And if you want an even easier method, just don't fucking play as Sayuri. This entire boss fight is a joke with any gun user, and there's no reason not to counter the bullets because it simply kills the thing much faster. Of course, this boss fight wouldn't be complete if it didn't take inspirational nourishment from the Mega Man X games and had a desperation phase, even if it's the shortest damn thing ever. The boss just literally goes apeshit and shoots random bullets at you. This is your perfect opportunity to counter as much as possible. This is a fight based on precision, and it's annoying to think that one little mistake on a bullet, either it be a lack of attention or a lack of precision, can fuck your entire run on a snap. Anyway, that's it for stage 4. It was literally one hell of a ride. I'll see you for stage 5, which is practically Metal Gear not so solid. Let's just say I don't really care about hiding in boxes. See you around.
A true warrior.
I got my goddamn internet back, so me and my voice are back to caress your ears in the not so quiet infiltration that's about to be performed before your very eyes. No, seriously. You could add a solid 2 minutes to the video if I took the time to go by undetected throughout these sections. It's not particularly difficult to pull off, it's just a bit more time consuming, and unless you're going for a no-death run on arcade to get the trophy, it holds little to no purpose at all if you've got the skills necessary to get through. One thing I want to talk about is how well executed the stage theme is. It starts off with a dark, lonely vibe, increasing the atmosphere for infiltration. It's pretty lonely and calm, and the deeper you get into the level, the more it becomes action-packed and dangerous. There's also that absolutely awesome metal tune kicking in when you reach the factory section. The progression is absolutely excellent in every regards, and this stage ends up being one of the best of the entire game. With all those elements becoming more and more intense, you really feel like you're going somewhere, like you're reaching the heart of the beast in a well-hidden, deep, armed, and dangerous place. I mean, for crying out loud, you start off in a lobby, make your way through the piping system, reach the supplies department, break yourself a way through to the weapons production factory, enter a goddamn furnace of all things, and after breaking your way through that, you reach the human experimentation laboratory, where they do some unethical shit, let me tell you. Converting human beings into weapons of mass murder isn't something I'd call ethical by a long shot. Tiberius, you fucking asshole. I'd like to sit down for a moment and talk about this mini-boss. If done with the default gun, it ends up being a very fun fight, and lasts long enough to be enjoyed. Unfortunately, there's too many ways to exploit this battle and prevent it from lasting any reasonable amount of time. It's kind of unfortunate because the concept and execution, if you give it time to happen, is actually quite fun to play against. Obviously enough, I'm using Sayuri, so this negates any and all aspects of the battle. Speaking of negating aspects, this is the only level where I don't feel a major difference between Sayuri and the gun users. It's quite particular, to be honest. The strategies, the path, and their executions all remain the same, so the behavior exhibited in this video doesn't change even if I'm using another character. It ends up being about using the right path in the quickest way possible, and even if a gun user covers up the distance, it's irrelevant because most enemies are so weak that they die as I reach them with Sayuri. If you want further proof of what I'm saying, go watch a speedrun on YouTube of somebody who did it with a gun user. You'll see little to no difference in path and methods, and if there ends up being differences, there will be enough similarities for me to be able to call it barely any different. Now that I think of it, we're reaching the human experiment lab, and I remember making the promise that I would go into detail as to why I hate escort missions so badly in a video game. Now's the perfect time to start this diatribe. I hated these type of missions back in Mega Man 01, and I still hate them now. There is no fucking reason for our heroes to have to take care of an extra baggage. I'd say that in 99.9% of cases, they are absolutely defenseless and end up getting in your way and slowing you down, while causing you frustration and grief more than anything. Nobody that I know, I insist, nobody loves these missions, and they are nothing more but a shit stain on the overall gaming experience. As much as I recall, Geo took a hit during this video, and I'm extremely happy about it. He's the villain in the next game, and he's such a useless little cunt in this game that I can't feel sorry for him. Unlike the guy from the escort mission in Mega Man 01, Geo hardly shuts the fuck up and makes every step in his company a goddamn misery. He's useless, futile, annoying, weak, and forgettable. There is no reason for these type of missions to exist. There is no way to make them worthwhile and fun. They're almost like water levels in Sonic or Mario. They slow you down and break your fun. If you're an aspiring game designer, please listen to this. Do not make such stages. Nobody loves them, and it's fun for no one. In this case, we have a 97% of a fantastic level with a shitty 3% at the very end of it. I can tolerate that, but I'm by no means a big fan of the horrible portion that is the Geomendrake escort. Now, why would I talk about Geomendrake and how shitty his segment is before most of it is even on screen? Well, because I don't like the guy, and the sooner he's out of the way the better. Instead, you'll get to hear me talk about what they could have done to make this section more interesting and worthwhile, because I don't believe in bitching about something without providing a solution. What went wrong here was breaking the pace. But at the same time, if you look carefully, there's very few enemies, and the place is quite empty. The only real challenge here is to not have Mandrake die. If he weren't there, most of the enemies and terrain could be avoided or skipped, or at the very least, have its length reduced heavily. Since Geomendrake is mandatory to the game's story, I believe they could have made him more useful. Oh yeah, and the boss for this stage is a goddamn fetus that hides inside what appears to be a modern-age 3D Rubik's Cube that has even more budget than any of Capcom's recent installments. Please help. It's got two arms on the side, which end up being literally the most threatening aspect of the entire fight. Destroy both of them as soon as you can, or if you feel gutsy, do like I did and try to gut the boss before it guts you, which is something I don't recommend. If you're fighting this boss with a gun user, all you have to do is hold your shot into one direction and dodge what's coming your way. This part is actually quite dangerous for Sayuri, and I gotta admit, I was on the edge of my comfort zone when I chose not to destroy both arms completely. In the interest of time, I figured I shouldn't toy around with the unnecessary bits and try to chop away at what truly matters. Which in this case happens to be an extremely tormented version of Casper the Friendly Ghost. Oh, how you like that? More of the shit I was exposed to during my childhood, don't you know? This series of videos is nothing but a coded message where I keep referencing what was cool or available during the 90s. At some point in the battle, these lightsaber things start showing up, and the only way to survive those is by staying the fuck away from them, or by thoroughly dodging them during a sprint, which isn't without risks. And since I'm speaking of lightsabers, those were pretty popular during the 90s. Okay, I get it. See you for stage 6.
A true warrior.
Stage 6 brings what I believe to be the first successful incarnation of a well-executed and non-boring train level. This is the first train stage in a video game that keeps me extremely aware of my surroundings and the consequences of my placements and actions. There is a small margin for error when doing this stage under the rules of this challenge, but it's not a very big one. Your placement has to be spot on, and that's that. In other words, you better fucking know what you're doing. Due to my preparation, it looks as though most of the level is rather tame and empty overall. But if I didn't use the specific route and planning, things would reach nasty levels of chaotic visual gibberish. What's tricky here is that the enemies spawn without warning, where in other levels they'd already find themselves placed on the screen for you. What makes this level so dangerous if you don't memorize safe placements is that when everything seems to be going right, one of these special jackasses can spawn directly onto you, and to add insult to injury, it often results in you staring at the screen in utter confusion, wondering just how the fuck you were supposed to be able to react to that while in the middle of action. It's not cheap or anything, it's just the way the stage is designed, and if you're playing a normal game, which means if you're not mentally deranged enough to play this game the way I did in this video, you shouldn't be having any problem. A powered-up character has none of the issues listed above in this stage, and a powered-up gun user takes this level as a fucking fun ride. The gimmick here consists of destroyable wagons and enemies that explode into various pieces that can harm you. There's a random helicopter that pops up, 2 very random mini-bosses, and a few, and I do mean few, environmental hazards that happen during the stage. Most of stage 6 consists of protecting the wagons you feel are part of your strategy and planning. Keep them clear and prevent anything and anyone from causing them harm. They're your platforms here, your safety nets. This entire level is like an endurance round. You have to kill everything before it renders a situation impossible for you to manage, and I kinda like that. It's almost as if it's a survival stage in a way. Since this series of videos does not contain anything such as a boss rush, and since I already covered most of what this stage is about, I thought I'd talk about the state of the Contra franchise and how Konami has little to no dignity in submitting its format as the next free-to-play bullshit title for cell phones. This is rather early 2017. Anyone who watches this in the future may consider my opinion no longer valid, because who knows what will happen to the Contra franchise, but let me get started anyway. In 1988 was when we first saw the original Contra, or Probotector if you're an unfortunate brother from the PAL regions, on our home console systems. This was back in the day of gaming simplicity. Contra was probably the first shoot 'em up of its kind. Move forward, blow shit up, reach boss, kill boss, happy jingle, move on. Unlike Mega Man, however, Contra was famous, or rather infamous, for the one-hit deaths. I mean, what the fuck? I'm supposed to be this super tough soldier, going around on an alien rampage and whatnot, and one hit is all it takes to bring me down? Then a sense of challenge installs itself within you, whether you like it or not. At first, it's a joke of, how far can I make it then? And if you were born in the 90s like me, it was a matter of, how far will I make it, and then be able to tell the other retards at school how far I've got. You quickly get addicted. This simple and punishing, yet addicting formula is what made games like I Want to Be the Guy such a success. It's not about feeling overpowered, but about how far you can make it and live to tell the tale. Moving on. With the years, people get the fucking point. Contra is badass. We get Super C, the series gets more attention than one would think. The series actually acquires some notoriety, and an actually existing, but at the same time extremely niche fanbase. Super C is remembered for how kick-ass it is, and then, when the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis comes around, we are graced with Contra 3 and Contra Hardcore. Now, I don't know what the fuck is up with 16-bit consoles and masterpieces, but both of these titles were excellent in their own rights. I'll specifically pick Contra Hardcore, since I'm on limited time here. and because everyone and their dogs have already sung the praises for Contra 3 1,000 times over before and after this video. Contra Hardcore was where we saw the franchise take a bold and brave new step into an unusual direction. While everything from the classic Contra experience was kept intact, this time we were given a much darker atmosphere, a character select option, a difficulty setting, and branching paths. This made the replay value go fucking sky high, and personally, I could not imagine a more optimal Contra game back in the day. The game terrified the absolute shit out of me when I was a kid, and it's something I still appreciate even to this day. With the updated controls, graphics, an innovative and revolutionary soundtrack, an exciting story, a ball-crushing challenge, and lovable characters, there was never any question as to whether or not this was the best Contra game ever made back in the day. Things move on, Hardcore stays quite underrated, and we reach a darker era, which I'll be skipping, but will confirm involves the PS1 and some of the PS2. At some point, all hope was lost, until one day Contra Shattered Soldier was released for the PS2, and brought back everything a pure and passionate Contra veteran could ask for. With Shattered Soldier being the perfect sequel, offering an optimal Contra experience with 3D graphics, an ass-kicking soundtrack, and the return of Bill Riser, who we deeply missed seeing in all his rightful glory, there was nothing more Contra fans could ask for, except, maybe more of this good stuff. Years pass by, we don't get a fucking hint on what's going on at Konami and what their plans for the franchise are. Everything stays quiet. Fans assume Contra is dead because of how niche the series and its fanbase have always been, and everyone moves on. One day, many years later, we get the announcement and trailer for Hardcore Uprising, which is a prequel to Contra Hardcore, an attempt at rebooting the franchise, and the well-intended start of a spin-off to the main Contra franchise. This time, we're fighting robots while fighting under an anime aesthetic and a 10 out of 10 soundtrack by Daisuke Ishiwatari of Guilty Gear and BlazBlue fame. I don't need to sing this game's praises anymore, especially when considering it's something I've done privately and publicly among friends a cringe-worthy amount of time. But my point is that Hardcore Uprising, while one of my favorite games of all time, did not sell well enough for Konami to continue it. They have no fucking idea just what the hell they're even supposed to be doing anymore. In an interview with Castlevania Lords of Shadow producer Dave Cox, he stated, and I quote, "If someone were to do Contra, to say hypothetically, it would be like a new IP in many ways. We are hardcore gamers. We played those games. But there are a lot of people that don't know what Contra is. They have no idea. There is a massive audience out there. They play Call of Duty and love those games, but they don't know what Contra is. I think if we're going to reintroduce something to that audience, it has to be new, unique. It's got to stand out. It's got to have a new idea, something really cool about it that's never been done before." End quote. While correct, this shit is absolutely terrifying. Does this mean that Konami's ideal vision of a next Contra game reflects appealing to the Call of Duty kids? We never get any update on that, and the next Contra game to come out is a free-to-play full of ads piece of garbage for cell phone, which unfortunately had a decent concept, but has been lost in its greed and is burning a painful death. I know the video is over, but I'm sure as hell not done. Things don't look too bright for the Contra franchise anymore, and I fear that, just like in the Mega Man situation, if we want the next big hit in the franchise, we'll most likely have to make it ourselves. Also note that my overview of the Contra franchise was for consoles only. I know I didn't slide Contra 4 in there, but if I was to cover every goddamn release, this video wouldn't have an end. Let's try to keep our hopes up. Somehow. The PS4 is still young. See you for Stage 7. Stage 7 is the equivalent of an entire Contra game on its own. It may not seem like it because this is an optimal video, but this is a very dangerous level, and breaking yourself a path is a very daunting task. The video is almost 11 minutes long, and I can still spend every second talking about something. This isn't the most dangerous stage of the game, but it is certainly the most intense one. The stage gimmicks are incredibly varied, and there is a sense of adrenaline and speed to this stage that really reminds me of the overall experience of Mega Man X2. You rush through a car chaos segment that every character has the very least amount of speed to breeze through without taking damage. This specific segment looks incredibly dangerous when you first experience it, but it really serves as a way to add up to the adrenaline and conclusive theme of the level. When this is your first playthrough, you don't even know what the final level is, and honestly, this right here feels like it. This stage is about one thing: climbing. You make your way to the top of the tower and hope none of the enemy barrage will be enough to stop you. The climbing is executed in two ways. The first has you do a horizontal ascension, as seen in the video right now, by climbing stairs and various obstacles, which are mostly present at a later point in the level. And the other way is by using elevators, and at a very specific moment, missiles, which, once again, will appear a little later. Anyone familiar with Contra 3 should have an idea what I'm talking about, since it pretty much introduced the concept. As for the elevator segments, they are not finite. As long as enemies remain on the screen, it'll keep scrolling forever. These segments aren't really any difficult, they are just short, survival-style time wasters that could really have been more dangerous. Unfortunately, they happen to be nothing but a bad joke, or at the very least, this one right here is a bad joke. We're almost at the end of the game and these regular goons is the only thing they could throw at us? Come on now. They literally are time killers and that's that. Enemy to speedruns and cannon fodder to casuals. I know I said this level was pretty dangerous, but this sure as shit ain't what I was referencing. Moving on. We start to see a little variety in the waves of uselessness thrown at us. Nothing strong enough to make a difference in the segment, and the only real threat is a missile that slowly but surely comes crashing into one of the elevators, introducing the idea that you aren't safe, even though you are being surrounded by incompetent morons with a gun that shoots one green bullet every 5 seconds or so. I'd just like to point out that they make stormtroopers look like professionals, and that's saying something. And now, for a legitimately dangerous climb that can simply be skipped, rendering any and all of Tiberius's planning and preparation of traps for this segment utterly useless. No, seriously, Tiberius, test your shit before installing it, you retard. Now, that specific barrier, for one reason or another, cannot be skipped or ignored. It seems Tiberius took my advice to heart and made one of them actually fully functional. This means I have to complete the segment manually, which isn't without risks, but helps save what I think I have left of a dignity when it comes to running this level. That little room I just completed is a fool's paradise if you don't know what you're doing. So many ways to die in such a small room, very well designed. The wall climbing segment is where things start getting all sorts of fucked up. If you're like me and are able to pull off the button mashing wall climb, you'll be saving yourself a lot of trouble. But even then you gotta stay sharp. Being on the wall like this leaves you vulnerable, not only to enemy fire, but also to unfortunate moments of bad timing, or poor bullet dodging management. The first helicopter right here is kind of an introduction to this. You have to manipulate the patterns of its bullets carefully to not block or trap yourself, and that far into the level, you don't feel like restarting the whole thing. After you get through the elevator segment at the beginning is where you really start taking an attempt seriously, and you don't want to lose that to a stupid helicopter boss. Oh look, it's those missiles from before. Except, oh Christ, they're actually serious this time around. Welcome to Contra 3 missile segment done vertically. This segment is very risky when you're doing it with limited mobility. I never considered this part to be difficult unless I was doing the no death run trophy or runs for this challenge. But when you have one life and want to protect it dearly, you just want this section to end. No matter how hysterically fun it is, it's nerve-wracking and uncomfortable. Nothing is stable and you don't feel like you hold any solid position whatsoever during the entirety of the segment. It gets more and more intense, faster and faster, the missiles explode more and more, and then you reach the top and take a fucking breather. Then you realize you're a masochistic sick fuck named Adelheid and you don't care about breathers. Small enemy barrage and then we reach another climb like the one from before, except without the skips. This one is filled with enemies and deadly situations. The almost tutorial-like one from before is now a very serious, actually competent challenge. This stage starts off very easy, and all the deadly and dangerous stuff is waiting for you in the later half of the level. Just think about this for a moment. This is literally the longest and most varied stage of the entire game. Failing a run in this level is extremely time-consuming, and because of how tame the start of the stage is, you're never really expecting what's coming for you in the second half, and man, does it get brutal. Oh no, by all means, don't pay attention to the sideways, tiled and looped swastikas on the walls. I'm actually suggesting that Hardcore Uprising's final boss is literally Hitler. If you look closely and scrutinize the plot, Tiberius did everything Hitler has done, from oppressing and torturing the Jews to human experimentation. Tiberius did the same shit to Crystal's people in hardcore Uprising. This game literally is a modern World War II reenactment with a Hitler-inspired jackass as the bad guy. I can't believe nobody on the internet pointed this out until today. Anyway, this segment right here is the Ultimate Run Killer 2000, also known as the Leviathan Chase. The premise is simple. You chase Leviathan down, who for once is out of his mech suit, and engage in a battle while running in corridors containing enemies that are only there to get in your way. I actually say fuck this and take my time. After a while, I got tired of losing all my attempts because I went too fucking fast. And if this method leaves you unsatisfied, I invite you to go do it yourself in the more common sense way. There is so much shit to kill you here, it's absolutely insane. Grenades, crumbling floors, annoying fucking useless enemies, the timing of the umbrellas, Leviathan's random RNG driven behaviors, the dodging, the comebacks, the rushes and back and forth pacings of Leviathan, the goddamn speed impairments, and the uncomfortable tight corridors where all this shit takes place. Everything is about controlling the pace here. And in a no damage run, this part is such a gamble that it makes every step a venture into the realm of paranoia, especially when considering the successful attempt you've got to lose so far into the segment. By this point into the run, I'm sweaty and my hands are fucking shaking. I have this strange obsession about perfection, and to be able to feel it within my grasp always puts me on edge. This is about not fucking up and keeping the functional flow exactly as it is. Functional. Leviathan's life bar goes down very quickly thanks to Sayuri and button mashing, and we enter the second part of the chase. The umbrellas are the least dangerous of the hazards, even though they can cause you lots of grief. The floor breaks down below us and we reach a not so high but definitely mighty futuristic ninja, Leviathan. This mini encounter is all sorts of tricky. This took so much practice and relaxation. I'm incredibly under pressure by the time I reach this part, and a fuck up is more than possible. I somehow managed to react properly and execute the fight in a well-rounded manner, but that's the least of my worries. A much bigger threat is actually waiting for me in the next room. God damn, that was close. Did you see how close I got to him? I almost bumped into his fucking face and that would have ended my run right there. Every goddamn time I watch this replay, I'm at a fucking loss for words. How the fuck? I'm so thankful it happened the way it did. Watch it in slow motion and get a heart attack.
Super machine gun.
Oh yeah, by the way, I did make Leviathan acquire the super machine gun weapon. Literally the boss himself. He does not make use of it, but it still proves that the NPC Leviathan that serves as a boss is really just a player version pre-programmed with patterns. There, theory proven. Also, I believe I'm the first on the internet to point this out, correct me if I'm wrong. So what's the big deal with this boss? The execution. I have a very strict choreography, and if one detail goes wrong, there goes my run. My hands are exhausted by the time I reach him, and anyone who played this game knows how dangerous this boss truly is.
You're poorly trained.
I got nothing to say for this segment. It's a long climb, so yeah. Oh shit. Okay, so now we reach the top, and we're actually not fighting Tiberius here. We're going to fight some fucking atrocity named Cerberus. Take a look. I know you're thinking about tentacle porn, you goddamn crazy bastard. Instead, we're fighting a boss that's a reference to a boss from Hardcorp on the Sega Genesis called Slave Beast Bahamut. In this current game, though, just climb on him and button mash. And that's it. The end. No big deal. Nothing worth getting all hyped up about. Unless you're playing as a gun user, then you're in for some fun. But god damn it, up to this point, there's nothing I wouldn't give to be done with this fucking level. My hand hurts like fucking crazy, but it's finally over. There's only one level left to this lunacy. Stay tuned for stage 8, which took more attempts than it should have. It's kind of weird to think that this project is already almost over. Let's not get worked up though. I've got one more recorded tale of my suffering to share with you, so I'll see you then.
A true warrior.
Well, this is it. We finally reached the end of the game, and this stage delivers flawlessly as a final level. I don't enjoy melancholy, but I'll be pretty upfront in saying that this concludes the last project I'll be doing in a while. Not only because I need a break, but because game design heavily demands more of my time. This has been an interesting project to say the least. It made me revisit one of my favorite games in a brand new angle and took all I had left in me to complete. Hours of retrying to get a satisfying video, even though I had previously obtained many successful attempts, sweaty and shaky hands, countless slip-ups, and above all, a whole new chapter in my masochistic adventures for you guys to enjoy. This project was a dream come true for me. For so many years I wanted to do this, and I need to give credit where it's due. Special thanks to my patrons on Patreon for helping me afford a capture card in order to record this, making this entire project possible at all. I'd also like to thank everyone from Jigoku Sanctum for being so supportive of my work and putting up with my constant bitching about how uploading commentaries is hard for me and whatnot. It's a little tragic that this feels like an end instead of a beginning, but I hope this project will be enough to keep the most passionate of my viewers entertained for a while. This is almost becoming touching, so I think I'll shut up with this emotional nonsense and move on with what you guys all love to hear, commentary. This'll be my last one in a while, so enjoy. Stage 8 is fucking chaotic. And I don't mean the stupid kind of mindless chaotic. This is actually what I like to call an organized chaos. There's a right path and method for you to figure out in order to get through this unscratched. I'll just say it involves a lot of patience and self-control. The missiles that drop down will make my life a nightmare if I don't bother reflecting them to that godforsaken ship. The upcoming segment is dangerous enough on its own. I don't need more reasons to fail. Damaging the ship in the background also prevents it from spamming a laser beam that destroys the bridge I'm standing on. Even without the laser, things are so crowded and there's unpredictable enemies that jump into the screen. That's not even counting that stupid missile spawning you have to keep in mind, because you never know when you may need to use it to protect yourself, or when you may be put in danger because of the small but effective restrictions it can impose on you. Thank God for Sayuri's sword projectile attack, because I don't need to bother about the shielded enemies. This is a little piece of mercy I can't refuse. The enemy management you need to perform here is ridiculous, but it's a good kind of ridiculous. It keeps you busy during every step of the way, and your video gaming senses are flying sky high. Now, for Metal Shark Player Stage, featuring dangerous floor and lasers. This is really a good piece of level design. You have to consider your environment and its hazards, not just your character's movement or the enemies. Everything becomes involved during this segment, and it's something I always found myself able to appreciate on a rare level. I'm fully aware it could have been done faster, but after successfully beating the last segment, I wanted to play it safe. It's harder than it looks, trust me. This little tidbit, on the other hand, is a free ride. A little breather before I continue running into this stressful nightmare. With the dash and mobility being unoptimized, it made for extremely demanding and stressful platforming segments. Everything had to be calculated, and the execution had to be spot on. This involved taking insane risks and getting out of any comfort zone the game had given me so far. What you just witnessed with the ceiling grab and climbing on the missile took more practice for the execution than what I have time to explain in this one video. I'm extremely proud of my execution there, and I heavily recommend watching it in slow motion or by pausing, just to see the precision required to pull such a risky trick so far into a potentially successful run. I promise you the entire boss fight does not consist of destroying laser shooting eyeballs. Vitus' engine is a giant ball that generates power for the ship. As a means for self-defense, it spawns various power poles that shoot two projectiles. Both projectiles are shot at a different angle. Some power poles spawn on the ceiling and some others on the ground. You can climb on them, but it's risky, because if your timing isn't exactly what it needs to be, they shoot bullets and there you go. You just took one nasty fucking hit. The strategy I use here involves damaging all the power poles until one is left. Use it to grab onto the ceiling, then destroy it. All that's left to destroy is the Vitus engine ball, and this is one particularly insane heroin addict. One thing I like to consider is, could this boss be defeated using the Contra 3 mechanics and controls? I came to the conclusion that, yes, it is thoroughly possible. The laser shooting eyeballs are not a problem, but things start getting messy when you have to deal with the power poles, and then the godforsaken Vitus engine ball that circles around the arena. I came to the conclusion that, since Contra 3 characters can do wall climbing, nothing was off limits for them. And since they have a move that allows them to shoot all over the screen by holding down the controller's shoulder buttons, it made the Vitus engine ball phase possible, even without sticking to the ceiling. This is, of course, under the assumption of minimalism. The regular bullets are actually enough to defeat this boss. With an ever-increasing speed and reaction to damage, I had to calculate, could the Contra 3 controls and mechanics be enough to survive? My research has shown that, yes, there would be enough bullets covering both sides of the screen to prevent the Vitus engine ball from hitting the player's hitbox. This is rather off the wall and odd as a tidbit to put into this commentary. But since I bothered doing the research, I felt the need to share it with you guys. The Contra 3 characters, using their respective mechanics and controls, could defeat this boss, and this would be quite a show. Now, for the second half of the level. Hell comes from below and there's enemies sharing your ground level. Nothing too complicated, but failing at this point for any goddamn reason is something utterly destructive, to not say soul-crushing. There is no way I can ever forgive myself for having failed a few runs due to being nervous in this segment, but this isn't worse than the time I failed my no death run trophy because I missed a helicopter grab by a fucking pixel. This stage really has left its mark on me. But this is all a thing of the past now. We've got something more important to worry about. And that's a Class A jackass of a Hitler wannabe who managed to ruin countless attempts by dashing into me because my hands were tired by the time I reached him. He's also more commonly known as Tiberius. What you're witnessing right now is literally the last button mashing I had left in me. This project devoured all I had as a button mashing capacity. I gave it my all in the most literal sense imaginable. Even though my entire arm was hurting, I was too determined to stop, and as a result, I can't button mash like I used to anymore. It's as if my hand lost its capacity by being overworked, and this button mashing right here is nothing. Wait until you see his second face. I'll be breaking the pace here. I need to bring myself back to fucking reality. This project took so much of me to complete, and I know I keep repeating myself, but the level of stress and anxiety I experienced by trying so hard to achieve perfection was something I only felt when doing the Mega Man X4 boss rush video. When you want to succeed, when you want to touch victory so bad that you're willing to ignore cramps in your limbs, something is wrong. Or on the opposite, something is horribly right. I can already tell that my next projects won't involve button mashing like this one did, simply because, well, I just can't do it anymore. We've reached the third phase, and this is the perfect time for me to conclude this project once and for all. It's been an honor to do this project, and to be the one to push the game so far using Sayuri. It's now time for me to move on to other things. There are so many projects, so many other challenges, so many other crazy things I'd like to tackle, but time is the issue. I cannot say for sure when exactly I'll return, but I won't come back empty-handed. Doing such projects involves playing the games a ridiculous amount of hours, not only trying to speedrun them, but also wasting hours upon hours toying with the physics, discovering quirks that may be helpful, studying the gameplay engine, the possibilities, the good and bad moves, the correct methods and strategies, figuring out how far the game can be pushed, playing the game so relentlessly that you become overtly obsessed with it, to the point of being more familiar with the game than your own peers. It's not necessarily a healthy practice, but it's the one for me. Working on such projects involves isolating myself in order to be really able to focus on achieving my goals. It's painful, but not without rewards. Let's finish this gracefully with what I have to say about the boss, shall we? Tiberius Invictus is absolutely horrifying under the rules of this challenge. There is so much he can do to ruin an attempt, and you can probably imagine how painful it is to fail so far into a run. He can destroy any piece of debris you're standing on. Much like the missiles from Stage 7, there is no real safe zone or solid position you can take. It's a battle based around adaptation, platforming, and positioning. One fuck up is all it takes, and it's more common than you'd think. His Falcon Punch is the most dangerous move he's got, because under certain circumstances, it can be impossible to properly react to, while his giant fireball always seems to be aimed at the same part of the screen. You try to grind as much damage as possible on him before he gets a chance to destroy all the residue available, sending you to your doom. Once you defeat him, it's not over yet. You gotta grab onto the helicopter, and if you fail to grab on it properly, well, fuck your shit up because you just failed the no-death run, or, in this case, the stage run for this challenge. It's unnecessary stress, but once you've done it, man, you're on top of the world, and given the location of this stage, it's most literally the case. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you for my next project, whenever this may be, and whatever it may be. See you around.